Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me okay? All right. Well, I'm very privileged to be here this afternoon to talk to you about culture. And a lot of times, as Steve has mentioned, culture can mean many different things to many different people, and it may seem fluffy at times, right, when you talk about culture. However, last week, I was in New York, and I was attending our company birthday, and I will tell you that culture is very real, and when cultivated in the right way, you can see immediate impacts to your employees, as well as your customers and your organizations. My name is Tran Andrada. As Steve mentioned, I've been in this space for over 25 years, and I've worked in many different industries, as well as many different company sizes, ranging from 10 to 50,000 employee companies. And basically, I've seen it all to where culture, when you foster it in the right way, can have amazing benefits to your company. And then I've also seen the opposite, where culture can be eroded very easily and quickly. So as we think about culture and how we talk about it, we can talk about it, and then there's also the reality, and there's a big gap in that. But I believe that this is something that's very important to building successful businesses and how we manage the changing world of work. So I'm going to go back to HiBob and how we founded the company. And we did extensive research in this field. We went back 7 years ago, so from the time that we were founded, and we talked to over 3,000 of our customers. In that time, we were talking to C-level executives, CPOs, CEOs, down to employees and line managers, and we wanted to find out and really get a pulse on the business. What was happening, where were we going, where were they going, and that relationship between employers and employees. And what we found out was that there was this thing that was happening, and it was really fascinating. And it really was in the way that people worked. I'm going to use myself as an example, and I'm going to date myself a little bit. If I think about me and say my parents and how we worked, right? We had standard working hours, 9 to 5. We went into an office, and our place of work was primarily in the main cities. We worked full-time, and technology really wasn't a part of our day-to-day work. We were always on, and for most of you, you may identify with this. We ourselves identified with who we were at work. I see heads nodding, right? Well, all of a sudden, something happened, and we have to shift. And now there's these employment definitions that have come out in the last, say, 20 years. Who's heard of WFH, WFO, WFA? All of you have, right? Remote, hybrid, flexible, global. WLB, work-life balance, or is it life-work balance? The employee experience, DE&I, all of these things now are coming up. And we believe at HiBob that over time, this will not change. This is going to pretty much be the theme of how we work. So how do we continue to foster what we call culture in this ever-changing world of work? So when we think about culture and why is that so important, and if you take a look at, too, a lot of the successful businesses out there today, they all have one thing in common, and it's really the culture that they fostered, the teams that they've built to continue to build upon the success of their business. And one thing that also happens, too, as you think about culture is if you get it right, everything else will follow suit. What does that mean? If you get the culture right, then your employees become happy employees. That's going to translate into the experience that you've given them at work, and it's going to transcend into that customer, if you will, experience. And if that customer has really great experience, well then guess what? That's going to impact your bottom line, your revenue. So it's just going to happen on its own. And you'll notice right here, I can give you many examples of what that looks like with many different other businesses, successful businesses. So that's truly the magic around that. So when we think about defining culture and what that is, it's pretty simple. It really is about the accumulation of relationships. One of the things that we know right away is that culture isn't something that you can fake, right? It's authentic. You can't copy it. And you also have to make sure that as a leader, that you really have to lead from the top and it transcends all the way down. In my previous employer, actually one of my employers, large ERP, leading cloud technology company, and our CEO, you will see him as he makes his way from the parking lot to the building. He will pick up trash on the way to the office. He will go into the bathrooms and he will wipe off the counters because he knows that that bathroom, that restroom that we use for our customers, it has to be spotless. He doesn't ask the executive assistant to do it, he does it. So when you think about leading from example, that's just an example of what that means when you lead from the top. And then the other element too is people don't really work for companies because the companies are the people. We are the company. We make that, we make that experience up for our employees. So again, when we think about culture, truly it's just an accumulation of those relationships. So coming off of that, one of the things that, again, when we think about truly at the end of the day, how do we cultivate culture and how does that transcend into business? There's a really great quote by Simon Sinek, and it goes something like this, right? Customers will never love the company, or actually customers will never love a company until the employees love it first. Makes sense, right? It makes sense. So again, if you put your people first, if you give your employees that experience, that will automatically transcend into your customers. Pretty natural. So when we think about culture, at HiBob, one of our founders, when they got together and they really thought about creating something unique and something special, we are an HCM cloud platform. They wanted to be very different than what was already there, what had already existed. So what they did was they talked about, well, what is so unique and how can we differentiate ourselves? Well, they looked at one, what is missing in the marketplace today? And they came up with 3 themes. Those themes were 1, there is an underserved market for multinational, mid-size, modern companies. So using that same theme, as we think about then transcending into, well, what does that mean in cultivating and really nurturing that business? They use the 3 key themes again, but this time transcending it into what we call the triple T's. And that really comes down to trust, transparency, and teamwork. And I'll tell you, when we talk about transparency and trust, one of the things that our founders did, and again, they put a lot of thought into how they founded the company. They also wanted to make sure that behind the company that there was a sense of culture and DNA. It took them 4 years out of our collective employee size of 700. They talked to 120 employees, and they asked the employees, and they took a survey to define HiBob's company culture. 4 years, 120 employees, and this is what we come up with. This is what we have. And we use this as our North Star in moving forward and really cultivating, if you will, that culture of building that exceptional. We have a whole board that really lists down, and it's actually a part of what we call our high growth, our annual performance review or biannual performance review. We wanted to make sure that we have these values and that we follow these values and hold each other accountable. We do what we say, and we interact with transparency and openness, and also trust. And I can share with you very proudly an example of what that means when we say be transparent. Our CEO, he leads these global all-hands calls once a month. Our corporate headquarters are in Tel Aviv. We all come together once a month. And what's really, I would say, really unique and wonderful about this is he will give us he will actually report to us and use the slides that he uses, that he presents to the board, he presents to us, the employees. So we know exactly where we are as a company, where we're going, and also the decisions that he is making on behalf of us, the employees. So again, when we think about culture and being transparent, I've never had a CEO who will share, if you will, a presentation that he presents to the board to me. I'm a people leader, but when you think about organizations, small or large, how many of you have had the privilege or have been involved with an all hands where you know strategically where you're going as a company and your financial results? Just curious. 1, 2, 3. Okay, a few. And how did that make you feel? Valued, significant. So you understand the vision, the company vision behind where the company is going. And again, I'm going to pull up Simon Sinek. Transparency, it doesn't mean that you have to share every single detail to your employees, but it's also providing the context for the decisions that are being made. So I had mentioned about, having our company party. Well, in our all hands call, a couple of days before our company party, our corporate headquarters in the US is in New York. Well, our CEO had to deliver some pretty sobering news, and it's really about being financially and fiscally responsible for certain things, for certain decisions that impacted us as employees. One of the questions that came up was, well, if we are having to tighten our belts, why are we still flying everyone to New York to celebrate our company party? Why, right? It was very simple to him. And what he said was, you know what? Because again, doing what he says, he said, you know what? This is just another line item on the books. I had planned for this because he believed that it was important enough for all of us to come together, to be able to be together and celebrate. And there was a lot of other things that came out of that, and I can share with you. But that's an example of really being transparent and leading from the top down. And as we think about that too, one of the surveys that we did as a company was we asked too, when we talk about being transparent and sharing where you're going as a company, our employees, do they really care about the company vision? So you'll notice here the gaps between what employers believe versus what employees believe. So employers think that only 15% of employees care about where the company is going. But truly, if you ask the employees, it's 62%. So again, when we think about transparency and we think about the way and the changing world of work and the workforce demographics, younger generations, millennials, some of us belong in that group, Gen Z perhaps, it's very different than what our traditional, if you will, workforce used to be. The other thing, as we talk about transparency, is just being clear. So knowing and sharing what is ahead so that there is no second guessing. There is no ambiguity, because this is something that can erode culture very easily. I came from an organization that originally really was only two things that they took pride in. One was technology, and two was culture. Culture was extremely important. So important that as a global company, they would fly all the leaders into the Bay Area for a 2.5-day leadership summit. And the leaders, the executive leadership team, made the decision to not outsource and have a trainer from the outside come in, because they wanted to make sure that their culture was not diluted in any way. So it was members of the executive team coming together to deliver this presentation. And it was a phenomenal presentation. It was a phenomenal training. However, over time, as that company began to grow and they put more layers in and they had to grow different lines, that culture started to erode, because guess what? Not all at the executive, at the top level, in terms of culture and that commitment and how they cultivated it, remained the same. But it was the leadership beneath that did not adhere to some of these principles. That started to erode the culture. So what happens? Attrition, there was a lot of that. There's a large exodus of talent that left the organization, and that talent, guess where they went? Competitors, right? So when you think about, one, being clear and really adhering to those values and the impact that it has to the business, it can be very detrimental. And there's a next one, is building that culture of trust. When you don't have that trust in your employees, that too will start to erode your culture and everything else that comes along with it. Our leader, Ronni, this is something that is extremely important to him, because when you think about trust, and today in the remote world of work that we live in, if you will, right? Work from home, work from office, there is no second guessing in terms of whether or not an employee, a remote employee, here, I'm remote in San Francisco, I'm not in New York, am I producing the same as I would be if I was in the office, right? Is there that level of trust? He trusts us as employees to make sure that we, one, remain productive and that we adhere to all of the things that he's shared with us, so that there is, one, when you have that trust and transparency, guess what? The politicking, the gossip, employees trying to figure out, well, where are we going? Why are we doing this? It all disappears. So that is something that he is very, very, that's very important to him. And as we think about that too, there's another item that has come up as part of culture, is that's also fostering that inclusivity. How many of you now have heard of the term DE&I, belonging and inclusive? This is something that's very, very important to companies. And as we think about, again, how do we foster that to make sure that we cultivate and bring everybody together, that's another way for us to make sure that we cultivate and maintain culture. And lastly, collaboration. I'll leave you with this. Being in the office that last week and seeing new relationships being built, existing relationships being strengthened, but more importantly, the productivity and the sharing of new ideas and the innovation that came out of that, well, I'll tell you what, however, how much that birthday, the money that was spent there, I'll tell you, that came back and really paid us dividends, because just from that one event, we've had new processes put in place. Now we have new ways of doing business, and just that passion, if you will, and that camaraderie and the trust that the teams have with one another, it has been such an amazing experience. So when we think about, one, that transparency, that trust, and that teamwork, the collaboration that comes out of that, that's truly what Ronni, our founder, and the leaders at our company, that's what we believe in when we think about cultivating culture and using that as our North Star, if you will, to drive behaviors for that changing world of work. So when you think about the different work models that you have, work from office, work from home, work from anywhere, that's something that we strive for and will continue to strive as a company, because as we all know, things change around us all the time, right? Technology changes, business changes, look at what's happening. So the only thing that we have really is just making sure that we stay true to those three things. And then lastly, as we think about fostering that teamwork, is also making sure that we recognize our teams and your employees as well. And then lastly, we pretty much came up with these surveys right here, and I'll leave you with this. In talking with our customers and their employees, these were the really 5 things that was most important to employees. And you'll notice the first one on there is culture. And with that, I want to thank you very much for your time, and it was a pleasure being here.